sitting around thinking about losing your son to addiction is enough to put anyone down the rabbit hole. And I had to sort of give up all substance. I had to keep my mind clear. I had to go to a place of extreme self-care to survive it. And in doing so, we created an organization called Guardians of Recovery, which is now a national nonprofit, soon to be a charity. And we have successfully supported over 60 people going to detox and rehab and recovery, and we have helped over 300 parents who are living the hell of watching their kids on death's door struggling with addiction. So you might say we're on the front lines of modern day war, which is what this is. So who here has been impacted by the addiction and crime crisis that we're currently in? Put your hand up. So most of us in Newfoundland and Labrador have someone in our family or someone in our distant circle that is impacted dramatically by what's going on. And you'd have to kind of have blinders on not to see it infiltrate our community. The crime alone, the businesses that get hit, the trap houses. For someone who doesn't know what a trap house is, it's a place where you get a house from social services. If you're using drugs, that may be a place for you to continue to use drugs. And then, of course, people in addiction invite all their friends. Then it becomes a place for selling drugs. Then it becomes an even more dangerous place for trafficking people, for rapes, and murders. This sounds like something out of a TV show, but it's happening right here in our backyards. In St. John's, there's a trap house on every block. That's how bad it's gotten. And it's not just St. John's, it's all over the province, especially in remote communities, because they are remote and because they don't have the same level of resources and services. So this conversation today is going to challenge the current system that we live in. And we need someone to challenge the current system. Because if we don't challenge the current system, then not only do we get more of what we already have, but it exponentially gets worse. So I hope to have a two-way conversation. Any question, any ideas, any thoughts that you have or want to contribute, I would love to hear your viewpoint. I have a little book here. It's called My Manifestation Journal. I'm going to send it around. If you'd like to put your name, email, phone number, and your wish to transform this current crime and drug epidemic in it, I would love to hear your intentions so that we can manifest them in partnership. That's what we're here to do. And in the front page is our website and also our Facebook group, which is now 6,200 people, 6,200 members, Guardians of Recovery on Facebook, of people who are concerned about the exact same thing. So if you could pass that around, please. And if you don't want to open it, no problem, but if you do, I would love to hear from you. We'll connect after. So what happened to Ben? Ben was an honors with distinction student, and he sailed through school. He was super smart. We traveled the world. I was fortunate enough to have a great career in the energy industry. I started the Oil and Gas magazine 6 years before we had a drop of oil in this province. And addiction didn't just, come out of nowhere in our family. It ran genetically through, especially the males in our family. So it hit my son, it hit my brother, who also suffered. And what did he suffer from? My cousins, nephews. It really ran genetically through our family, and it does that a lot in Newfoundland and Labrador. And I hope to teach you something today that nobody's talking about mental illness. And it's so important because people believe that addiction can be solved when someone makes the choice to change. And that's only true for a certain percentage of people. It's not true and wasn't true for my son. If he could have made this decision, he would have when he went to jail. He would have when he was living in a trap house. He would have when he was living in a low barrier shelter where there was 9 men to a room and drugs rampant and people overdosing. But he couldn't. Why couldn't he? That's the question. That's the most important question. And the answer to that is the reason why we have so many homeless people today, why we have a huge population who can't even see that they're sick. So if you start looking at the commonalities of addiction, homelessness, you can see that their lives are falling apart, but they don't have the capacity to make a choice to get better. And that was the case for my son Ben, who had, I'll give you a new word today, anosognosia. So anosognosia, if you look it up, happens to 45% of people with bipolar and 80% of people with schizophrenia. And what does it mean? It simply means they have a brain dysfunction that doesn't allow them to have cause and effect, and they couldn't make a life-saving decision if they tried. Thankfully, not all people have that. But the majority of people who are homeless, who don't get better, who can't make a choice, fall into that category, and that's a massive group of our homelessness. So how do we deal with people who have anosognosia, A-N-O-S-O-G-N-O-S-I-A, anosognosia? How do we deal with them? Harm reduction is not going to solve it. Why? Because harm reduction is based on the model that at some point someone will make a life-saving decision. But if you don't think you're sick and you don't know that you can't make you don't have cause and effect, how can you possibly say, oh, I want help? And what we're finding, and you can look all of this up with Cleveland Clinic's website. These are, I guess, the most advanced research that we have so far. If you have a whole population of people who have anosognosia and have bipolar and schizophrenia, and they can't make their own life-saving decisions, then they fall into a category where that frontal cortex, part of their brain that would make a life-saving decision, is simply not there. And what we're finding as well is that with substance and drugs, especially the drugs that are out right now, things like fentanyl, is that those drugs are doing the same thing as someone who has bipolar and schizophrenia. It's stopping them from having cause and effect. So on top of that, we have a whole group of people who don't have the capacity to make a life-saving decision because of their substance. Now, hopefully that group can get lucky and have a moment of clarity at one point and make a decision and choose. But in the case of someone like my son Ben, we have bipolar in our family, that never ever could be an option. So harm reduction never would have worked for Ben. But he was given that option the whole time. At 16 years old, he decided he smoked weed. Now, I don't know if you've noticed or not, but the weed today is not the weed in the 1960s and 1970s. Before, that weed was like 5% THC. That element that gets you stoned, that kids love, that people like to get high. Let's tell the truth about it. Getting high is fun. Puts you in a different state, just like drinking. It lets go of your inhibitions. And that's all great, except 1 in 6 kids will get cannabis use disorder. 1 in 6. So that's kind of like one person at every table here. So you think about that. If you're genetically predisposed, and you're smoking weed that today in the weed shops is 25% THC, 30%, and in the vapes can be up to 90%. It's blowing kids' brains out, completely putting them over the top, and consequently we have 4 times more psychosis today in our adolescents than we did 30 years ago, because we have genetically modified weed designed specifically to be stronger and more powerful, because that's what people buy. Problem is, the more weed you smoke, the more you need to smoke in order to get the same level of high. And that's the path to addiction. I'm looking for that same feeling. I'm looking for that same experience. And therefore, I have to have a stronger amount. So we're supplying it with a higher strain. That all sounds great in premise until your kid ends up in psychosis, or your loved one. 1 in 10 adults will get cannabis use disorder. 1 in 6 adolescents will get cannabis use disorder. And that doesn't go away. That's something they have to battle for the rest of their lives. So you have to ask yourself, is it worth it? Is it worth setting our kids up to fail? Because for Ben, after he smoked weed, and it wasn't strong enough, and in his mind, there was nothing wrong with him, he then tried shatter. And people who smoke weed know what shatter is. It's a stronger version of weed. And from shatter, he went to coke. And from coke, he went to crack. And from crack, he went to opioids. And eventually, he took a pill, which is a synthetic designer pill manufactured here. We just had the largest bust in Newfoundland and Labrador of a manufacturing plant of these synthetic pills that carry a whole cocktail of different drugs in these pills. And with fentanyl in it or protonitazine, killed Ben. He didn't want to take that drug. That's what was put in that cocktail mix. In doing the work I do at Guardians of Recovery, I talk to 2 or 3 moms per day. That means I'm on the leading edge of what's happening in the drug world every day. And it's horrific what's going on, absolutely horrific. In the last 8 weeks alone, just to be clear, we have, and it's not in the news, we have had 2 14-year-olds die, a 17-year-old, a 33-year-old, and 2 other people. That's 6 people in 8 weeks. This is a mass epidemic. You should be angry, and you should be worried, and you should be afraid for your kids and your community. I'm not saying that to scare you. I'm telling you the truth and saying what most people won't tell you, won't see it on the news. Because someone who dies from overdose never makes the news. The only people who actually make the news are when, like my son Ben, that person dies in a public place. Ben died in a park. Most recently, those 14-year-old kids who died, they took 1 pill. There's no addiction leading up to it, and this is another fallacy of harm reduction. There's no starting small with these pills in the marketplace. You can't start small with protonitazine. It's an instant killer. That's how the 17-year-old and the 14-year-old kids died. A batch of that went out and they were goners. Just experimenting, innocent kids. Not addiction, none of that. That's how powerful these drugs are in the marketplace right now. And we're manufacturing it here. How did we start manufacturing? Unless you look at the history of where we come, we can't solve the future. Well, BC, British Columbia, decided to legalize illicit drugs. including fentanyl. They said, we're going to make this, and in the world of compassion, we're going to make this available for you, and you can have up to 2.5 grams of fentanyl on your person. Does anybody know how many people 2.5 grams of fentanyl can kill? No? 1,200 people. And that's the problem with the media. And that's the problem with the conversation that taking a small amount of this is okay. That's not a message we should be sending out to the marketplace. So, okay, in the interest of being compassionate Canadians, we're going to allow you to do fentanyl. 1.2 grams is legal for you to have on your possession. But it's not legal to manufacture it, and it's not legal to traffic it. So where'd they think it was going to come from? Is it going to drop out of the sky? By legalizing that drug, they set the community up to manufacture and to traffic. And next thing you know, there's fentanyl all across Canada. And how many people have died from illicit drugs so far? Does anybody know? 50,000 Canadians are now dead. Canada has become the opioid epicenter of the world. This is a graveyard. Canada has become a graveyard for the opioid epidemic. So I don't want to be the bearer of bad news. I just want to tell the truth about what's going on. Because once we tell the truth, then we can finally get on with changing it. So you can harm reduction all you want, but without actually addressing that drug epidemic and all the drugs coming into Newfoundland, you guys know, it's coming in right here in Marystown, one of the most popular places for it to come. Anyone who's gone through addiction knows what's going on here. Start speaking up. Start telling the truth. Start dealing with the reality of what's going on in your community, because we get what we tolerate. If we tolerate that level of drugs coming in, then the next thing you know, someone's going to experiment, an innocent 14-year-old, and there's not even a chance to have addiction. They're a goner. Or, worst case scenario, in the case of me with Ben, 7 years of a torturous existence of trying to help my son. Every single day I stayed in Ben's life. I would pick him up at the shelters. And why would he go to low barrier shelters? Because in the interest of being compassionate, low barrier shelters are where everybody gets to do drugs. He had a safe home down the street, my house. But he didn't come to my house. Only when things got so bad at those low barrier shelters. So, is it compassionate? Is it harm reduction to have a low barrier shelter where everybody's there doing drugs? Sounds good in premise. Sounds very compassionate. But what about the person who wants to go to recovery? Where's the sober facility? That's where we went wrong, everybody. We gave all our money to low barrier shelters and harm reduction models, and we forgot to spend money on detox, rehab, and sober living homes. That's the first priority. And so is keeping the drugs out of this place. So before any harm reduction happens, immediate detox, immediate rehab, sober living homes, in that order. That's how we eradicate the epidemic. Harm reduction is the bridge to get you to that space. It's not the answer. It's the bridge to the answer. Harm reduction without recovery is enabling. I'm dealing with people every day that are waiting 3 months to get into recovery. Every day. Why are we spending money on harm reduction when someone who's asking, begging, dying, literally, to get into rehab, and they can't. But there's money for crack pipes. That's the reality of the situation we're living in right now. You can't even create a program unless it's under the banner of harm reduction and it's inclusive. Well, I challenge that statement because it's exclusive of all the people who want to get sober. Ben would never have been able to get sober at Choices for Youth, where he was when he died. He could smoke weed on the premises. He sold drugs from the premises. He kept drugs on the premises, all underneath the banner of harm reduction. He had no diagnosis, no early intervention, 7 years living on the streets. He watched his best friend get stabbed. He went through more trauma and more harm in that 7 years when he was on the streets living in trap houses than you could ever imagine. And we're calling that compassionate, low barrier shelters, supporting our system. I'm sorry, but that is not support. We are where we are for a reason. Things are exponentially getting worse for a reason. We have to pull it all apart and get back to the very beginning about what's going to work. And who's going to tell us what's going to work? People who have come through recovery. They have the answers and they have the solutions. And they'll say, yeah, sometimes harm reduction works. But if I could have gotten into detox, if I could have gotten into rehab, if I had a sober living home where I could have been with 60 other people and had back to work programs, and I felt like I was part of a community that accepted the addiction that I had, just like any other illness, I could have thrived there. I don't know one single sober living home in Newfoundland and Labrador. So I made it my mission to get that in place. And last fall, I worked with John Abbott, who was the Minister of Mental Health and Addictions at that time. Every Monday, I'd show up at Confederation Building, doing what I'm doing right now, screaming to the top of my lungs, detox, rehab, sober living homes, in that order before anything else. So finally, I got the Premier to agree and say, okay, let's get some sober living homes on the go. Because not doing so is exclusive of all of the people who choose recovery, not forced recovery. They like to play with that word too. Oh, involuntary, forced recovery. We're so far away from that, it's not even funny. People who choose recovery just want to go to recovery. So we went through an expression of interest. All the interested people who were interested in sober homes got together. We designed a model for sober living homes based on Calgary, Alberta's model, which they have 27 sober homes. And by the way, the only province in Canada that has declining overdoses, because they went back to basics and said, we're going to talk about recovery first, and we're going to talk about harm reduction as a bridge to recovery. Even in Portugal, that has the top, one of the best programs supporting people in recovery. They did it by, when you break the law, you show up in front of a panel of 3 people. You have 3 choices. You can go to jail, pay a massive fine, or you can go to recovery. See, all roads need to be leading to recovery. Addicts will take the path of least resistance. We have to design a society and a culture for sobriety, a conversation for sobriety. It doesn't even show up on our radar. It's like, oh, after the fact. Absolutely, it's important to have Narcan if someone overdoses. But I want to talk about recovery and sobriety way before that. Oh, we can't talk about sobriety because 12-step talks about higher power. Shag that. If that 12-step program works for that person, gets that person recovered and doing well, which it has done for thousands and hundreds of thousands of people, and that's one option that they should have. And there should be many options. There should be no limit in our society and our culture as to how that person got to that goal. The point is, we need to get to that goal. And all harm reduction and all low barrier and all government departments should have one criteria on which to base their success. Did that person recover? If not, what was the problem? Oh, they have anosognosia. They couldn't make that decision for themselves if they tried. Here, we just did a scan. Proves it right here on the brain. Oh, that person's homeless. They had a brain injury. Now we know why. Like, we gotta get back to diagnostics. We gotta get back to brain scans. How many people do you know with addiction who actually had early intervention? Which is another thing that Alberta does. The minute you show up with a mental health issue, you go into their program called 24/7. 24/7 is you meet a psychiatrist at the door and get early diagnostics and intervention. In Newfoundland, you can't see a psychiatrist for 3 years. And we're buying crack pipes, but we're compassionate. Look how great we're doing. We're going to supply you with the alcohol at the alcohol managed program. Sounds great until it goes way off the map. Last summer I was down at Ben's Bench where he passed away. Putting flowers there has become like a place where people go and visit and contemplate. And a harm reduction person came along with a bag of beer, and there was all kinds of homeless people there in a public place, and provided people with the alcohol in a public space. Under the alcohol managed program, they get supplied beer, free beer every day. Now, that may sound compassionate, but number one, it's illegal to drink in a public place. Number two, all of a sudden, once they got all the beer on the go, they started screaming and fighting with each other. So there was public disturbance. So we're creating that. You have to stop and ask yourself how much of the disaster we're living in right now is created by the systems, by well-intention, by so-called compassion and inclusion. You have to question those modalities. Because if it's getting worse, you have to track back and figure out what is the cause. What's missing that could make a difference? When I talk to parents every day who their kids are on death's door, and some of the parents are not going to make it. So some of the parents are so stressed and so upset and dealing with so much, knowing that their kid could die today, which is what I dealt with Ben every day. I have PTSD from sirens. When you live like that on the edge every day, and you don't know if your son or daughter is going to make it through this day, you have so much stress and so much pain that after a while your body just gives out. Right now we have 3 moms in that situation who may die before their actual kids die. So not only is it the people in addiction that are exponentially ramping up and the numbers are increasing and our overdoses are exponentially increasing, but also the parents and the families are also not making it. So Guardians of Recovery works to help those parents and people in addiction every Sunday at the Lantern, and also Tuesday evenings online for people across the province. So if there's anybody here who does want to join into that conversation, we do not have conversations about enabling situations. We have conversations about how we're going to fix this thing. And if there's one message here today, I can say with certainty, is that you guys are going to fix it. You got to sit here today, look around the landscape of your life and say, what conversation am I not having that I know to have, that I should have said, that I do need to speak up, that I do have to tell my story, that I do have to call out that trap house, that I do have to make a police report. Because where are the drugs coming from? They're coming in on the trucks, the boats, the ports of entry. You can order drugs in Canada Post. We're tolerating that. We're allowing that to happen. And we're the only ones who can stop it. By just saying, you know what, that's not a future that I'm willing to let happen and allow my children and my grandchildren to live into. Ben had a son he never met. He's my everything. And all this work I do for him. Because I don't want him to have to go through what my son went through. Genetically, he's already predisposed. And if we don't fix the culture that he grows up in, that's his destiny. We can't look away from that. We can't pretend it's not happening when all of us know that it is. We have people who are drinking and doing drugs and villainizing our seniors, going in and taking advantage of our elders in their homes just because they're so desperate for drugs. The drugs are so addictive. So our senior people are not safe. Our businesses are being broken into continuously. And what it's doing is leaving us all in a position of no hope. And that's the worst position a society can ever be in. We have to take back control. We have to get back to basics and say, no more. This is not what we're accepting. We're not accepting synthetic pills in our schools. We're going to have a drug dog instead in our school. That's what we're doing. We're not accepting drugs coming over on the ferry. We're going to have a drug dog at the point of exit at that ferry. We're not accepting drugs coming in skidoos and going out on the shop and making certain people rich and killing off all of our sons and daughters. We're going to call that into the police and make sure that it gets dealt with. We're not going to sit here and watch trap houses pop up on every corner in our neighborhood and think, well, you know what? It's none of my business. Because it's become so huge, it's now everybody's business. You may not have a daughter or son specifically with addiction, but you have a friend or a family member, at the very least, who is impacted or has passed away. That happened. I consider Ben gave his life for the drug epidemic to get transformed into a recovery revolution. His life had meaning. He became something so important because he burst the bubble on the mental health and addictions crisis. And all of a sudden it became hugely commonplace to talk about this. And I started screaming it from the rooftops, not because I wanted to. I already had a job. I had a career. But I could not look away while one more mother went through what I did. I couldn't look away and watch another child die, a 14-year-old. And I certainly couldn't look away and allow that future to be what my grandson was going to live into. People in addiction are different than who they were. When they're under the influence of substance, it requires extreme boundaries, and that's something that we all have to learn, and it's an important lesson to learn. Because we get what we tolerate, and if we tolerate addictive behavior, we'll get run right over by the addiction, and then it becomes an enabling society. That's not healthy. So some of us are called to learn to create tough boundaries, and some of us are called to learn to recover. Whichever side you're on, at the end of the day, there's a huge message in there. You're called to become bigger than who you are, to learn something, to grow, to come into your own power, to know who you are, why you're here, your purpose. The drug epidemic, creating the addiction epidemic, and the crime crisis is calling on every single one of us to step up, transform our own communities, and make a difference. So I listen for Ben every day. It's like being told what to do from the other side. And, you know, it's not what I wanted to do, but I'm obligated to do this. Because if we don't, the fallout of allowing all of this to occur in our beautiful, amazing province is too devastating to think about. It's time for us to push back and say, hey, we're gonna create the budgets and the revenue, the municipalities, the provincial government, the federal government. We're demanding recovery first. We're demanding on-demand detox rehab and sober homes first. Then we're going to talk about all the rest of the stuff. We're going to talk about keeping the drugs out of this province first. And the thing about our minds is the first thing we say is, it's too big for me. We can't do that. I'm just one person. I can't do that. I was fortunate enough to live in New York at a time when it was so dangerous that you couldn't go around the corner without getting mugged. It was so dangerous. My father worked for the United Nations. And one man changed the whole thing around. Mayor Giuliani said, we are no longer tolerating this. And he put a cop on every single corner, and now you can go to New York today and walk up around just about every street and feel safe, like you're not going to get mugged. So it's not that it can't be done, it absolutely can be done, and you guys are the ones who are going to do it. I know what my job is to empower you, to empower your communities and your families. So my question today is, how are you going to do it? What are you going to do? Who are you going to talk to? Because if you're a person who's come through recovery, you're the most powerful voice in this era. You're the person who can speak to what it's like. You lived it, you went through it, and you also know how to get out of it. Speak your truth. If you're the parent, you have an experience to support and heal family members who are going through that hell. If you're a community leader, you have the opportunity to put protocols and measures in place and get partners in place that say, yeah, I know what else is going on. We hear the conversations that it can't be fixed, and that's not who we are. That's not what we're standing for. That's not us. That's a conversation that it can't be done, And that's not what we're settling for here. So, I know it's a tough conversation, and I'm sorry that it is so hard, but that's the reality of where we live right now. So I guess I want to hear from you guys if you have any questions, or if you have any thoughts about this, or if I can answer anything for you. I just want to make sure I have all my notes. So tell your kids when it comes to the messaging about starting small, there's no starting small with the synthetic protonitazine. There's instant death. Get those posters out in our schools. When it comes to speaking up, find a place for your voice, whether it's on Facebook groups, Facebook Reels, through your community or your organization that you're associated with. Businesses, entrepreneurs, you guys are going to be the savior of this society, because it's through your corporations and your workers and creating a culture of sobriety that's so commonplace that culture is the new cool. Right now, we have sober living homes, sober living towns, and sober living cities starting to pop up around the world. That's the good news. That's amazing when you think about it. We already did a great job when it comes to disability, of including people with disability. We haven't done a perfect job, but we've done so much better. We have parking spots. We have an inclusive mindset. We need to do the exact same thing when it comes to mental health and addiction. And when it comes to fentanyl and any drug with the side effect death, we have to say no. It's not going to be legal here, because that's the next thing they're trying to do, is legalize that here. And all these systems are designed to enable. When I tried to go help Ben, the privacy law kept me out of his medical information, helping him, being able to know that he overdosed. I found out that he died on Facebook. That's how off the privacy law is. So we have to stop that. That's not acceptable. The other way they get away with it, how did 50,000 people die from illicit drugs? On Ben's death certificate, it says accidental overdose. Well, if it's an accidental overdose, does anybody have to be held accountable? Does anybody have to be charged? Does the judicial system have to take action? Do the police have to find out who made that synthetic drug? No, we're just going to package it up in a tidy little box, and all those people have accidental overdose on their death certificate, which once again enables a whole entire group of people dying from synthetic drugs. You might think, well, that doesn't make sense. Drug dealers don't want to kill off all their clients. And here's how it works. It's like baking a cake. They put the fentanyl in, or the protonitazine in the pills, and they use a pill press. But they don't know exactly how much is in that pill or in that batch. It's like when you put sugar into your cake mix. You might have sugar on one side, a lot more sugar. And that just might be the sugar that kills someone. They don't know, it's Russian roulette. So the message to our kids is, one pill can kill you. Not to start small. One pill can kill you, and if you try it, it's the same thing as putting a gun to your head and pulling the trigger and playing Russian roulette, because it could be you. That's the message that goes into our schools that we need to tell our kids. So accidental overdose, all of these words, they matter. Inclusive, show me inclusive of sobriety first, and then we'll talk about inclusive. When it comes to trap houses, social services was the first one to give Ben a home at the age of 16, even though he had a safe home. Choices for Youth came into school and said, if you're having trouble with your parents, come see us. What 16-year-old in their right mind who is, starting to create their own independence in the world is not having trouble with their parents? That's not a reason to give someone a home. What they didn't do, what they didn't put on the brochure was, once you get your trap house, you'll have other drug people in that home with you. They'll start selling drugs. You will become addicted. You'll become so addicted that if you don't take these pills or this substance, you will get sick and you'll have to chase it every single day. And your whole life will be about nothing but chasing that, just to feel better. And you will see your friend, Cyrus, on the steps of Choices for Youth. And you will witness a man hanging himself at 150 Marchant Road. And you will see crimes and incidences and rapes like something out of a TV story. But it's going to be your life, and eventually you're going to die. They left all that off the brochure at social services. It's called emancipation. Let's get emancipated. We can all go there, smoke dope, don't have to worry about school, no rules, no regulations. I don't know if anybody remembers the book Lord of the Flies, that we all had to read that in school. That's what it's like. Lord of the Flies is like kids given all these personal freedoms without personal responsibility. Doesn't matter if you're a kid or an adult. That equation will eventually lead to chaos and death. Personal freedoms without personal responsibility to balance it is going to lead to chaos and death. Sure, do whatever you want, no rules, trap houses, smoke whatever you want, until the whole thing corrupts. That's how my son lost his life. At 16 years old, he wanted to smoke weed, sounds innocent, and hang out with the boys. And it continued on. And he never got out. As much as I fought for him every day. I was on the steps of Confederation Building. Weed and welfare stole my kids. Sitting there by myself, trying to protest. I don't call that responsible rearing for our teenagers. I call that child rearing. And that's wrong. And that should never happen in our society. We should not create the environment where people get personal freedoms without personal responsibility, because they lose purpose, they lose direction, they lose their ability to want to get up in the morning and be a contribution. We take everything from them by giving everything to them. So there's things to fix in our society. My son paid the price for all those loopholes, and I vowed that I would go and patch up every single loophole that he fell through. And when I took him to the Janeway over and over to get help, and he just said, I'm fine, because he didn't even understand that he had a condition. They took his word at face value, and he never got help. Parents have to be in the circle of care and be able to advocate for their children. And that was never extended to me. And consequently, Ben is no longer here. So, I'm sorry for the difficult messages, but it's authentic and it's true. And if there's one thing that you take away from this message today, is that we're going to change this together. Your organization, your group, your friends, your schools, your solutions, create the app that's going to make the difference. Create the system that's going to stop the drugs from coming in. Create the culture in your society that says We're not going to throw all of this beauty away. We have one of the most beautiful, amazing places in the world. And we are so fortunate to live in a place that is kind and free of, environmental toxins. We have fresh air, fresh water, and beautiful lands. We're not going to throw all that away for this, the drug era. And we're not going to say, oh, it's happening across Canada, it's going to get worse. No, we are not doing that. We are not tolerating that. That's not who we are. We want to be leaders in this and transform it. So, I think, I'm sorry if I scared you all to death, but that's the truth of how it went. And it's the truth of what's, not just how it went. I wouldn't be speaking now if it was a one-time thing. It's happening to all the kids. 2-3 calls per day is what I have in this conversation, unfortunately. And I'm waiting for the day that we have no calls. Is there any questions? I like the tough questions, if you have any at all.